Hello everyone and welcome back. Today I'm going to talk about objectivism and specifically the word objective, because a lot of people get this confused when they're looking at objectivism, when they would say something is not objective, and they're using the word not incorrectly but not in the same context that's being used here. And it's tricky because there's a lot of overlap in the way that they're using the word versus the way that it's meant in the terms of philosophy. So the way that I would break it down is not so much by defining the word in multiple senses, but by the comparisons that the words are antithesis to. If that makes sense, I'll explain. So most people use objective in terms of non-biased. So you get a objective third party, you get an objective viewpoint, an objective feedback, something like that. And what they mean is someone who's not biased or someone who doesn't have an agenda or an alternate benefit from having the results sway one way or the other. So objective is removed from the situation. And that is accurate and that makes sense. And in a lot of ways, objectivism and what we talk about would mean that, or at least you could apply that to it, but not always. So the difference here in philosophy is we're not comparing objective to biased, we're comparing objective to subjective. And you can tell even with the words, it's a more direct comparison here. So objective versus subjective means something does exist versus something exists in the way that people interpret it. So sure, there's a whole lot of overlap here that if you have something that's, I guess, objectively good versus objectively bad, objectively good versus subjectively good, well really you're qualifying something, so that can't be objectively good. Is kind of a contradiction of terms for philosophy. But for layman's terms, objectively good, they would say it's objectively quality or it's objectively enjoyable. Even enjoyable doesn't really count in that way. But you get what I'm saying. So they're saying that it's a third person came in and would read it, and without any bias or any ulterior motives, they will say it's good. And you get enough people in here, then you would say you have an objective view. But a viewpoint is not the same thing. Anytime you're talking about a viewpoint, that's not within the realm of philosophy. Philosophy is talking about objective in terms of it exists without anyone's perception. So, and one of my earlier videos, I had said that Ayn Rand's objectivism is named that because it's the only philosophy that actually will say A is A. And I kind of misspoke in that because Aristotle created the law of identity, or at least developed it, or he wrote about it, whatever you want to say. So the law of identity means A is A. A is not B, A is not C, A is not anything else, A is A. So identities exist, something does exist. And she has taken that and she's built an entire philosophy essentially from that concept. So when I say something along the lines of the world objectively exists or men's mind objectively exists, what we're referring to is saying that the law of identity is in play here, more so than this is non-biased opinion. So why is this important in a philosophy? I'm just going to touch on this real quick. Everything from this philosophy is built on the idea of the law of identity. So if you want to understand, how people should interact together, how to build a law, well, first you need to understand how a person should act in the first place. In order to understand how a person should act, you have to understand who that person is. Now, in order to understand who that person is, you have to understand what that person is and the environment in which they're existing in. In other words, it's the nature of their existence. In other words, to take that, in order to understand people's politics, you have to understand their ethical structure. In order to understand the ethical structure, you have to understand their epistemology. And then in order to understand that, you have to understand the metaphysics. And in the metaphysics of that, by that I mean the nature of existence, that is where the objectivism is unique, and the fact that they're saying the law of identity is accurate, and we're going to build everything from that. So hopefully that explains some things. I've heard a lot of people misuse the term objective when they're referring to specifically trying to countermand, or not the right word at all, specifically when they're trying to argue against something of objectivism, they'll use objective as a anti-bias versus anti-subjectivism. So just want to clear that up, and hopefully that makes sense.